Yep. So let's just begin, Devika, right? A very good afternoon to all of you. Welcome back to another interesting webinar, and today's session is about a different geography altogether. I have with me Devika Thapar, partner at London-based Wilbe Ventures. She will provide a deeper perspective on building and scaling deep tech startups in UK. Two more things from my side. Please ask questions anytime during the session. Devika will cater to most of them after her presentation. Please do not forget to leave your feedback to help me better my future sessions. Over to you, Devika.
Great, thanks, Ankita. I took a few minutes there to get set up. I always say AV trumps AI at the start of every presentation. Well, morning and afternoon actually to everyone who's dialed in and listening. My guess is we probably have a mix of cities on the line, Bangalore, NCR, etc. I actually just spent a few weeks in NCR myself and was blown away by the pace of innovation and investment, as well as to see an early wave of deep tech in India itself. So I'm looking forward to sharing my thoughts on what it takes to build and scale deep tech companies in the UK, but also hearing from you on what you're building and how I might be able to help. So we have about an hour together. I'll spend the first 20 to 30 minutes laying an outline of the deep tech trends and landscape in the UK, followed by a rough mental framework to think through what it takes to build and scale internationally, and leave considerable room, let's say about, again, 20 or 30 minutes for Q&A at the end. Just a quick background on me. I grew up in New Delhi, studied economics at Stevens, spent 4 years in management consulting right after, then went to the US for my MBA at Yale. While there, I worked with Yale's tech transfer office to help evaluate patents for commercialization in the biotech and material sciences space, which is what triggered my interest in this whole area. I joined IBM post MBA to help commercialize their research in AI and NLP in Watson into a business, and I spent 5 years with them, half of which in London and the other half in our headquarters in New York, in roles that involved building the market for enterprise AI in Europe, chief of staff, and then product management for a set of software, enterprise software in the Watson space. In that time, I also got a sense of what it's like to work at the other end of the spectrum, which is with early stage, AI and other emerging tech companies. And I got involved with Wilbe as a venture partner. I liked what they were doing. It was hands-on, with skin in the game, and all in on deep tech. So I joined them full-time last September. Partner. What we do is support technical founders using deep technologies to build ventures across global innovation hubs. We're based out of London, but have ventures spread across Singapore, London, and California. And we're an in-house business team for affairs related to legal, finance, go-to-market talent, during the first commercialization phase of the venture, and then in the long run as well. And we do this as ordinary shareholders. So we often get asked, why are you based in the UK and why not elsewhere? And in short, the UK still remains the capital for startups, particularly deep tech, as well as venture capital in Europe. And there are a few facts to support this. The UK houses close to half of the unicorns in Europe. It leads Europe in VC investment volume, followed by Germany, France, and Israel. And even the US venture capital firms would have their first offshoot outside of the US, often in London, if they want a footprint in Europe and even Asia. The third is it's the second largest home to deep tech companies in Europe after Germany, and this is really largely because of the following 3 points. It's home to a large pool of deep sciences talent from this nexus of leading universities of Imperial, Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, and several others that are emerging. it has a tight-knit and supportive ecosystem to help commercialize your deep technology, which I'll delve into a bit deeper shortly. And then the opportunity to actually use London as a base to scale is rising steadily, with access to patient capital in the region, the rise of corporate venture capital, as well as the vantage point that London has in terms of its positioning and the language, and the strategic access that gives to global markets. If you look, this is some research that's been done by BCG in a report, what they call the Dawn of the Deep Tech Ecosystem, where they kind of have analyzed, close to 9,000 companies, in 7 active categories of deep tech, which in turn comprise 16 technologies. And looking at Europe collectively, it's a dominating region as far as deep tech. If you within Europe, you'll see that it's really Germany and UK that lead in terms of deep tech company volume. Which, going a bit deeper into this, of course, there are different areas of deep tech that are more active in one region over another. So if you look within UK, for example, AI and biotech are leading deep tech categories, followed by, you could say, blockchain and quantum computing, which is a relatively small volume, at least as per this analysis. So this gives an important kind of food for thought when you think about expanding globally, depending upon the product and the core tech that you're building, which market would make which market would make more sense. You look at the unicorns that are emerging out of Europe, and let's say 40% of those are out of the UK. Half of those 40% all come from the deep tech space. So if you look at the bars that are highlighted in orange, you'll see half of those companies are in AI, in biotech, and in AR and VR. So now a big factor to all of these stats and to the UK leading the path as a deep tech capital is really the tight-knit and supportive system that it has for deep tech company founders. So if you go kind of anti-clockwise, starting from talent, as founders, you have access to both engineering and business talent, both graduate as well as experienced, in the UK. So when you think about expanding to an international location, having local talent on board becomes quite critical. Now, there are specialist firms that can help recruit such talent, but of course, nothing beats leveraging your own network, and building trusted relationships with those that can help you become global, which is quite an important step in your journey. Customers, you obviously need a market for your product. It means that you need willing customers to experiment, test, and buy your product. And the UK and its access to Europe, it has a mature B2B market and a growing market of corporates that are willing and ready to test and fund deep tech products. And you can see this by the number of deep tech unicorns even emerging from the UK. The third is the research centers. Now, these exist in the shape of government institutes, academic labs, and even private foundations, and they often would have a specific remit in terms of a particular area of science research that they're addressing. So, for example, the overarching body is UK Research and Innovation. If you look at their website, you'll find a ton of different areas which have funding opportunities and grants associated with a particular area of research and commercialization. So that might be biotech, that might be agri-tech, for example. But then you also have research centers that are attached to universities. So Imperial has its White City incubator, Cambridge has its own, and Oxford have their own set of labs. You have private foundations such as Wellcome Trust that focus only on biotech. From a partners and incubator standpoint, of course, depending on the stage, your focus and the type of support you need, you have a range of partners or accelerators that can kind of help you, get this launching pad in the UK. So there's the work that we do at Wilbe. You have the likes of Deep Science Ventures and Entrepreneur First that specialize more in kind of getting raw technical talent to form ideas and then companies. Then you have Founders Factory, that kind of specialize on accelerating startups, but with a specific link to corporate. So they have a lot of several corporate tie-ups in different sectors. And then you have corporate accelerators, just as you would in India as well. So for example, Microsoft's Scale Up program. In terms of the government, there's a whole range of support that you get, right from visa, and I'll touch upon that towards the end, to funding and grant opportunities from what I mentioned, UK's research and innovation, as well as companies such as London and Partners that focus on promoting investment in the UK. And if this is an area of interest, we can touch upon it in the Q&A section. Investors, angels, VCs, CVCs, tons of those. I think what's most exciting here, that there's a growing number of investors that are focusing and honing in on deep tech because they see the value opportunity that the sector is creating, because a lot of the low-hanging fruit of innovation is kind of already been done, at least in the Western markets. So you'll have a nexus of VCs that are surrounding the different university areas like Cambridge, Oxford, and then you have several that are based in London and are actively investing in deep tech. From a services standpoint, as always, specialist firms that focus on helping you get off the ground with legal, accounting, tax, for example, and then global access for the point we've already covered before in terms of the region and the positioning. So what does all this mean, for you guys and girls as founders? I'm guessing by virtue of attending this session, there's some sort of an interest of exploring what it takes to bring your company to the UK. Now, regardless of the size of your company, the stage of where you're at, and the product that you're building, I think as founders, you need to ask yourself, 3 questions before making a decision to enter the UK or really any international market. And the first would be, how attractive is this market for you and your company? And there's the obvious question around market opportunity and size, but most importantly, there's the question of customers. And do you have customers in this market, UK, Europe, that are willing to try and buy your product? And there's often this misconception in deep tech that the product would sell itself. But just like it is for any startup, product market fit is absolutely essential. The second question is your product ready to serve the market? Now, are there gaps in your existing product? Would you need to work on a whole new set of use cases or product features? Will the sales process be the same? And what will be the cost of doing this? The third piece is, how does this international go-to-market, or in this case, UK, really fit your overall vision? How important is it? Is it for you? Is it about pivoting and relocating your company to the UK entirely, or is this a part of you stepping foot into global airspace, so to speak, with UK being your first base? Now, all this would impact the level of effort, the complexity, compared to the value and the impact you gain by going to market internationally. So let's say you've kind of had a thought about these 3 questions and you've answered market attractiveness, yes. Answered it, product readiness, yeah, yes, but and then from a vision alignment, yes, it aligns to your vision. So what kind of comes next? I think often there's a tendency to kind of jump the gun and just go right ahead and go to market without some sort of a point of view or a plan. But it's really pointless to do that, because it's important to kind of have a yardstick or a line in the sand that you can measure, test, and validate against. So it's important to have some sort of a strategy or a plan, an iterative one, set right at the outset. Now, at a high level, the plan has 2 elements. So you have your go-to-market model, and then the second would be your operating model. You probably already have this defined for your company. And just as you do have that for your company and your products, you would need to define one for the market that you're entering. So in this case, let's say the UK. Now, anecdotally, even big SaaS companies have had troubles scaling internationally by adopting a one-size-fits-all model. So, what sells in India may not necessarily sell in the UK. So first, your go-to-market. Now, this will vary depending on whether you're at the stage of getting your first 10 customers or you're at the stage of getting, let's say, your first 100 customers. So, out here, I've kind of drawn a fictitious enterprise AI, cybersecurity company, where this company could be at the stage of getting its set of first 5 or 10 customers, or it's really going big and getting your first 100 customers. And depending on where you're at, your go-to-market plan I'm pretty sure would vary. So, and it will vary along different variants. So, what's your customer value proposition for your first 5 customers versus for your first 100 customers? I mean, in this scenario, I've assumed that it's kind of the same, but it might vary depending on the customer set and the stage at which you're at. Then, what are your differentiators? What sets you apart from the competitors that already exist in the market? Which means drawing a landscape that's different probably from what exists to your home ground. The third is use cases. What would be the use cases that would be applicable to the market that you're going into? Whether UK or using UK as a setting ground for Europe. It might be at the start, if you're looking only to get a handful of customers, you only go in with one use case and test that in terms of product market fit before kind of scaling across multiple use cases. For your key users, that might be the same, whether that's in India or even internationally, or it might vary depending upon who you'll be targeting for which use case in the UK. Your key buyers, same thing. What's the pricing model that you adopt, whether it's for your first 10 or 20 customers or for your first 100 customers? Again, what works in the UK might vary in terms of what works in India, both from a pricing perspective, from a sales perspective, and as well as from a marketing perspective. So these are just indicative examples to kind of think through how you might go about some of these aspects of a go-to-market plan, depending upon the stage that you're at. For example, from a channels and a sales play perspective, if you're just trying to kind of dip your toe into the water, it might make sense to kind of leverage an indirect sales channel through strategic partners rather than going heavy and landing and expanding right at the get-go. Required resources. So therefore, that'll vary. If you're going through an indirect sales channel, it might be useful to have a go-to-market rep rather than landing a sales, tech sales, and a deployment team. So once you've kind of defined your go-to-market plan, what comes next is like, what's your operating model? Which means thinking through the logistics of where you are based, the budget, the KPIs, and importantly, how your team will be structured. So I've used kind of a rough, I've kind of focused in on this piece on how your team would be structured rather than focusing on the operational metrics and budget, et cetera, because obviously that's highly subjective. But from your operating model in terms of how your team is structured, taking rough back of the envelope indicators for this, whether your team is on-site or it's off-site or remote, whether it's full-time or part-time. And then if it is on-site, are there local hires or are they transfers from your home base? These are important things to think about. Again, depending upon the stage at which you're at in terms of your international go-to-market, are you just about entering and dipping your toe and therefore building for your first handful of customers, or are you really about scaling and going, let's say, going big? Accordingly, you could have a different set of metrics or a different set of indicators that might work. So, for example, your engineering team, might be best that it's remote and really working part-time on the international go-to-market piece. And when you're on the building stage, if you're at the scaling stage, it might make sense for the engineering team to still be remote, but have a dedicated, set of resources or one resource, or depending upon let's say your metrics, to have a full-time team dedicated remotely on working just for the UK market. Likewise, if you look, let's say, at sales, if you're the building stage, it definitely makes sense to have someone on site. Who that someone is, it varies. It could be the founders kind of spending their part-time out there, or it could be getting a local rep, which again might vary at a scale stage. It's having someone on site who might be local, might be someone who's transferred, and then it's having someone full-time. And likewise for other kind of critical team members that you'd have, as a venture, which extends beyond your core team, but even in terms of, the services that you need in order to get off the ground and running when you're in a new market, the advisors that you might need on board, as well as investors. So once you kind of have those in place, it's about setting your operational metrics or your KPIs, as well as then thinking through the budget that you can carve out in order to do your global go to market. Now, of course, these are templates, and without getting into the trap of analysis paralysis or death by PowerPoint, the key to getting started is conversations with relevant people within your network, attending a session like this, having a chance to ask specific questions, and to do due diligence and start experimenting with product market fit. What could really, so from just looking at these set of parameters, what would really help in terms of due diligence is asking yourself those 3 sets of questions, but then leveraging your personal network and professional network to having as many relevant conversations as you can, as you think through your go-to-market and operating model plan. In terms of product market fit, nothing helps but actually having on-ground validation from potential customers, potential advisors, and even potential investors. How you do that can vary, again, depending upon the stage that you're at and how important and how, let's say, a UK go-to-market fits into your going global strategy, whether you need a go-to-market partner, whether it makes sense to get an international or a UK-based advisor on board. That may be technical or that may be business, whether it makes sense to do your fundraising overseas, either from an angel or an VC, and we can speak a bit more about that, the pros and cons. And then researching on government initiatives that exist to support you to actually get overseas. Now, I've mentioned some of these bodies already, so you can take a look at these, and if you're keen. There's the UK Research and Innovation, there's Innovate UK, both that have a budget of 7 billion, all towards generating and fostering science and commercialization of science and research in the UK. And they therefore have a ton of funding and grant opportunities. You have investment schemes, particularly angel investors, that are quite beneficial for very early stage startups. You have startup loans, working capital loans at favorable terms. And then you also have, let's say, UK trade companies like London and Partners that specialize in helping you get off the ground and enter into the UK. From a regulatory perspective, there are visa schemes that also help in terms of relocating team as well as headquarters to the UK. So, for example, if you look through the Tier 1 category of entrepreneur visa and exceptional talent, there are some interesting scheme options, and I can speak at length of these, that can help you get actual physical access to the country. Thinking through your legal setup, so it's actually very, very easy to incorporate in the UK. It literally takes you £13 to get online on Companies House, and you just need a registered office in the UK, and you have to list your directors of your company in order to get set up here. But then where do you go from there? How do you kind of navigate licensing if you have hardware, shipping of hardware? How do you navigate IP? How do you navigate taxes? How do you navigate accounting? So these are all kind of factors to think through. But I'm going to kind of pause here because I've spoken at length for close to 25 minutes. I think generally the world that we're in, and this is a quote that I like from a book that probably many of you have also read. I mean, thinking global from the start can be beneficial. but it's quite important to keep in mind that one size doesn't fit all. So thinking through your strategy and your plan, even if it's just an iterative one and a draft one, really helps in drawing a line in the sand so that you can then work from it while setting foot into a market like the UK. So I'm going to pause there and see, what questions we might have and what we can dig into deeper.
Thanks, Devika. Please ask questions. We have one already, Devika.
Sure.
Are you able to have a look at it?
Sure. It'll just go off screen. Give me a second, chat.
Sure.
Okay, is this when scaling, why is it necessary to have the investors on site? I'll take that one.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not necessary to have investors on site. It'll really depend on, I guess, what you're trying to achieve with that scale. So if it's just, UK is just one market as opposed to several markets that you're trying to go global in, then yeah, it may not be necessary at all. But if, let's say, you're using UK as a critical landing point and base, almost as your, let's say, your second headquarters, then it may help. It really depends. So if you tell me a bit more about the context that you might be in, I'll be able to answer that question. But no, it's not necessary. Okay. Do you see more enterprise B2B or consumer deep tech startups emerging globally? So I'll flip the question and say I think there's some good research done by the SOSV accelerator, which you guys can check out online, which shows supporting data that it's B2B companies, deep tech companies that tend to, let's say, scale and have higher valuations as well as chances of exit, at least to date. So it's either B2B or B2B2C versus B2C companies. And that's probably a nature of the technology and the nature of the problems that the technologies are trying to solve. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next, and feel free, guys, if I haven't answered it appropriately or you want to delve in deeper, just ask again. All right. Does Wilbe have Indian partners? Well, I am Indian, so I am the Indian partner, but I'm based in London, but travel frequently to India. How do you define deep tech companies and products? Okay, a good question, and I should have touched upon that at the start. So for us, deep tech or let's say deep sciences companies really refer to companies that have emerged from significant engineering or scientific breakthroughs. So as a result of R&D, they tend to all be IP based and do require some sort of a let's say effort as far as commercialization of the technology is concerned. This sort of a broad definition is what we're seeing is being used not just by us, but even, let's say, by folks who are publishing reports in the space. So like the BCG report that I referenced, and then also some of the VCs that are quite active in the deep tech space. Okay. Just checking in. Are you still able to hear me?
Yes, Devika. Absolutely.
Okay,
Crystal clear.
Awesome. Because it feels funny that I can't hear anyone's voice. So if there's a way in which you can actually speak,
If
that
you
would
want,
be
I
great.
can also narrate the questions. If you want, I can moderate. I'm happy to do that.
No, it's good that you're here, so I
Okay.
don't feel like I'm talking to a blank screen.
Yeah, I'm your mute support.
Okay, do you have a successful story about an AI startup from India that grew in size within Europe? Okay, so actually one comes to mind that is, well, you said AI. I don't know, they're not really AI. So, okay, let's say deep tech. I'm going to take the liberty of generalizing your question to an Indian deep tech company that's growing in Europe. And then I can have a think about an AI startup in particular. One that we've come across because we were aware of, we know the founder, is Carbon Clean Solutions. They're still, of course, in their early stages, but they started out in India and are growing and expanding, using UK as a base. But they're funded by Indian. I'm not sure, they might have a UK VC on board as well, but they're funded by Indian VCs like Wilbe Ventures. And then let me give a think about other AI startups that are from India and grown in size within Europe. Nothing comes to mind in the AI space in particular. Okay, how would the current Brexit scenario? Yes, Brexit is up. I was waiting for a Brexit question. How would the current Brexit scenario play towards scaling your company in the UK if you want to look at Europe as a whole? Oh my! If only a futurist and could tell the future. So I think there's a lot of indication as of now to say that, regardless of what plays out with Brexit, there's enough support and capital and all those other things that I kind of went through in terms of fact that the UK will be a capital for deep tech in Europe, and arguably it could also be one globally. And it helps, of course, in terms of its strategic positioning and language, which tend to sometimes be less in favor for some of the other European cities. So often you'd find companies will set up in the UK and then kind of land and expand from here. Unless, of course, your company might be in a very specific space, let's say, IoT or hardware, industrial goods, where Germany would probably be a good kind of bet compared to some of the other markets. France is very big on AI, so and also has a tight-knit supportive ecosystem. Language then kind of becomes another play there, and also the way some of the employment laws and things like that are set up in France are different from the UK. Okay, able to talk to our cohort when we're bringing in September this year to London. This is sure. I've me on LinkedIn.
Devika, your voice is breaking.
Oh, all right. Okay, if you didn't catch me for the last one, sure, just send me the details on the information. If you can still see the slide. Yes, you can. Yep, out. Okay, next question. Can you hear me, Ankita?
Now you're again, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Is there a system, procedure, grounds to try opportunities and exceptional talent visa? System, procedure. Okay. Let me try and break that question down. So okay, I'll break it down in three parts. So one, is there a system, procedure, grounds to try out, foreign opportunities, and then something to do with the exceptional talent visa? First, due diligence is extremely important. So if you have a network in the UK, know people, personally and professionally, leverage that in order to understand the market to see if it's a right fit. you can get support in terms of an international go-to-market partner, then that could be a good way of working with them to see whether there's actually product market fit for your company. And then if it makes sense, for you to kind of either relocate or set up shop in the UK, yes, there are schemes that make that, from a government perspective, relatively easy. I myself am in the UK on the exceptional talent visa, so I'd be happy to share more on that. If you're coming as tech talent, the program is sponsored by Tech Nation. You can look online, and it's pretty self-explanatory on how that works. The other option besides the exceptional talent visa is also the tier 1 entrepreneur visa, which just requires proof of funding for your venture and a whole lot of business plans. All right, what are the best ways to find part-time employees in the UK? Okay, good question. So there are specialists. So one, you may find that you don't need necessarily a part-time employee. You could do with using an indirect, sales channel, which is probably lighter on cost and higher, potentially higher on reward right at the outset. And that indirect sales channel will depend upon the product. It could be, a firm that's, selling other software products, or it could be a specialist firm that helps you go to market in Europe. But if you're at the point where you're kind of looking to get part-time employees, there are a few firms, talent-specific firms, that help in talent recruitment, and part of their remit would also be in part-time for part-time employees. If you drop me a note on LinkedIn, I can kind of give you a sense of one or two that I'm aware of, and also think of others that might be useful depending upon what space your company is in. The first one at the top of my mind is this company called White Hat. Okay, what are the key compliances or pointers that one can keep in mind while doing business in the UK without having a physical office there? So good question, but slightly broad. It'll depend on, it'll depend on different aspects of your company. So for example, let's say you might want to have a registered office in the UK, and that means setting up on on Companies House. If you're setting up on Companies House, with a registered office in the UK, that means some of your information will be public. So if you go to companieshouse.org.uk, you can get a list of any company that you want, a list of all the directors that are publicly on the files, as well as some other information. Let's say you're not at that. Let's say, so that's one aspect. The other aspect is, if you might have part-time employees or reps, what's kind of the framing of the employment contracts and compensation, etc. So that's kind of incorporation. There's HR in terms of employees. There could also be insurance depending upon the team that you might have in place. Then other compliance factors can come in mind based on, you might need a different licensing agreement, or at least an addendum to your existing licensing agreement because you're selling in the UK. You might need, that software licensing. You might also need different, if you're actually building a hardware product, there might be shipping clearances and a whole set of import and tax implications that would need to be kept in mind. So just as you would think for your, where you're operating currently, the set of different compliances you need to keep in mind, you kind of need to think through that even when you're setting foot overseas. But of course, if you only have a lightweight presence, chances are that you probably don't need to do a lot of the heavy lifting locally. You can make do with using whatever existing frameworks and agreements that you have from your base and home country. Okay, really good questions, and I hope I can get to all of them. How good is a strategy to build a reseller network in the UK to establish yourself instead of going there personally and setting up everything from scratch? I would go back to model was only kind of at the stage of dipping your toe in the sand and getting your first handful of customers. I think it's essential to do some on-ground due diligence as founders, or with the help of a partner in the UK. If you're in the process of really scaling, then yes, it might make sense to have some sort of a strategy of building some core processes and people, let's say, within the UK itself. This will depend upon the product, but irrespective of what the product is, some on-ground due diligence and market and customer validation yourself is quite valuable, and then kind of going ahead building the relevant networks with a reseller network can help. I have my own point of view on reseller networks and seeing and structuring those agreements in order to make it in a way that's rewarding and incentivizing for the reseller network, but also rewarding for UK to whom we are rendering our services for over 5 years now, somehow we have not been able to go beyond. What would you recommend as a fit approach? A couple of plans for the UK. This is from Jen. This is quite a specific question. Maybe I can take this one offline because it'll help to understand what is it that your company is doing and building, and what's kind of the goal that you want to get to as far as the UK market is concerned. The next question: in deep tech or AI, there's innovations in product or the solution. How do you handle IP issues when addressing enterprise, allowing them to reverse engineer your solution? Okay. Again, quite a specific questions. And yes, you're right. You'll probably have some sort of a trade secret or an IP in your product, or in the frameworks, or in the solution. This will, you'll have. It's about how you structure the IP and how you structure the trade secrets, so that you protect yourself from any potential reverse engineering, which would probably be the same scenario, operating from anywhere in the world. It's just that this, the frame, let's say the IP licensing that you do in the UK would vary on probably what you do in India. Okay, going on to some more. Is it better to have a product be well established in India before taking it to UK or outside India? Okay, so good question. It depends on the product you're building and the vision for your company. Are you building for the Indian market? Then yes, you have tons of opportunity in India in terms of scale. And India itself is a beast as far as the size of the market and the intricacies of the market, that it makes sense to kind of hone in and get that right before even thinking of going global. However, the flip side, if you're building a a core piece of technology. Back to the quote that I had referenced towards building up your idea, but might also come from outside. Then it might be in your early stages of your venture. It might be a case of, it might be beneficial for you to actually think about being in the UK sooner rather than later, because you might find that you have a larger appetite of customers or corporates who are willing to try and buy your product than you might have in India. Again, it will depend upon the product that you're building and the kind of technology that you're. Okay, would we as Wilbe Ventures support an Indian company which is in the IoT space and is currently bootstrapped and expand in the UK? We do that. We haven't worked with an Indian venture to date, but we help US companies, for example, land and expand in Europe, and likewise companies that are based in Singapore. Drop me a line and it'll be good to understand your product better. Is there a system procedure ground? Okay, I think this might be a repeat question, so I'm sorry if I didn't answer it appropriately. This is from Abhishek, which is there a system procedure grounds to try for grant opportunities and exceptional talent visa? So I think I covered this. I would just kind of in short say, check out UK research and innovation and tier.gov.org.uk websites, and it'll give you a plethora of information that's available both for grant and funding opportunities for different areas of deep tech. So I think the UK government has outlined about 8 to 10 areas that they want to really hone in on and build both talent, research, and companies in. So for example, like drones, AR, VR, AI, etc., and then look at the tier 1 entrepreneur visa and exceptional talent visa from a visa standpoint. Okay. Are there any enterprise technical challenges fulfilled? Sorry, give me a second. Are there any enterprise technical challenges that can be fulfilled to demonstrate suitability for assistance from agencies, programs, etc., mentioned or referred to in this talk? I'm not sure if I understand the question. The best is to look at the different programs that I've mentioned, some of them which are on the website, on the slide right now, and see what their eligibility requirements would be. Okay, some comments. IIT Delhi has a platform to harness deep technologies. Yes, I read about that, and I think that's incredible. All right, I'm just going through the questions. Tell me, Ankita, if I've missed any. I might have, so I can answer those.
Sure.
And website, you can reach out to me there once more.
I think you've answered most of them, Devika. I'm just scrolling.
Okay. I think there's some specific questions around, I think this is one that I missed, okay, around reseller channels, etc. Those are quite, specific, and it really depend on what's the product that you're looking to bring to market. And accordingly that'll determine what the reseller channel would be. Are you looking at, for example, an RPA software? So then who are the top RPA vendors in the UK or in Europe, and which ones would make most sense for you to partner with, probably because you have a distinct differentiator and competitive advantage compared to some of their other existing partners, or they're giving you favorable terms. And okay, what are the key? I think I've answered this. Okay, one you have from Deepti, you mentioned AI and biotech are leading in deep tech in the UK. Do you have a startup in the UK which has been able to handle the US healthcare market? Great question. If you're operating the healthcare space, you probably have a good sense that healthcare is obviously an extremely local and often a fragmented market, particularly in the US. UK, of course, is small compared to the US market. That being said, I think usually, usually you try and kind of hone in and get some successes within the that you're in, particularly in the healthcare, before you kind of set and expand, let's say in the US, because the US really is fragmented by each state and has a very different healthcare system than the UK. So if you look at DeepMind, for example, that Google acquired, which focuses heavily on healthcare as a vertical, they're spending a lot of their efforts on doing that within the UK and not necessarily in the US. And vice versa, US healthcare companies kind of are honing in on that market before going into the UK. But if you go into healthcare as a broad term, and if I was to, let's say, tangibly bring in biotech, then that's different, because then you're looking at drug discovery, immunotherapies and things like that, which might be a slightly different process as far as scaling and transferring the know-how and solution beyond beyond your existing borders and irrespective of the market. Okay. I think they have would you share the page? Okay. So I think this presentation will be made available, so you can take a look at, and I'll add some of the links per se that are mentioned on this. Can you?
Your voice is breaking, Devika. I'm losing you here and there.
Sorry. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Now it's better.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So I think that, yeah.
4 minutes are left, Devika.
Okay, awesome. I think I've covered most questions. In case I haven't, feel free to drop me a LinkedIn. My email is my first name, Devika, @wilbe.com. So very easy. And this presentation will be made available to you, and which will have some of the resources that I've. I hope.
Hi, Devika. Are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So thank you so much for this lovely presentation. Great stats. Europe being a house of 38% unicorns, intriguing stats. I'm sure audience today, startups in particular, have gained a lot of relevant and significant information if they are willing to step into the UK. Thanks for this, Devika, for all the information. Plus, I would also like to tell you that even we have NASSCOM Deep Tech Club, which we run with the help of the industry champions. So I would like you to have a look at it. The website is nasscom.in/deeptech/ to get an overview. So I would like you to loop in and jump in here as well, Devika. It will be very, very interesting for you.
Super. Sounds good. Thank you, Ankita, for organizing this. And guys, feel free to reach out to me for any specifics that you have on the UK. And I hope this was useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the audience, tomorrow at the same time, I have another interesting piece on social selling. So do join me. Plus, on 24th, I'll be coming up with bringing personalized and proactive experiences to the digital world. And on 30th, we have mobile tech tips for easier device support. So thank you, everyone. Especially thank you, Devika, for your time and effort. See you soon. Bye, all of you. Take care.